With another Marvel movie right on the horizon, that means we got to go back and rewatch some more Marvel movies. That could be a good thing or a bad thing, but you will find out right now on Spoiler Alert. Welcome back to Spoiler Alert. I am your host, Sheldon, here with Evan, and we are ready to talk some more spoilers. Only this time, it's actually for movies you've probably already seen. Because with Thunderbolts coming out just this next week, that means we had to go back and prepare for what we might expect in Thunderbolts, which in this case means revisiting all of the characters that we're expecting to see in Thunderbolts. Now, Evan, we already reviewed Falcon and Winter Soldier, which
so we already get Winter Soldier and
in there, John Walker.
Yeah.
But we did have to go back and rewatch a couple more that...
Lucky for us, Black Widow had 3 characters.
Yeah,
it had Yelena, Red Guardian, and Taskmaster.
We knocked it out pretty good. So between that and then Ant-Man and the Wasp, we should hopefully be prepared for this.
Be caught up on everybody's story.
And I gotta say, I haven't been this excited for a Marvel movie in a while.
Me neither.
Because I actually feel like there is potential.
There's real development. And I was going to mention that eventually, because I just like to bring it up, but we've seen it over these past few shows and movies, and it wasn't really well done, which was kind of fun because then, you know, the audience would have had to really pay attention to see whatever her name is, the one chick that used to be on Seinfeld.
Yeah, the one that keeps showing up in Black Widow.
She just kind of just came into the picture in random places where who is this lady?
And
then all of a sudden
she's kind of like I think they're going for like a Nick Fury type of thing, where that's what she's kind of going to be, and these are going to be like the Misfit Avengers. Yeah, that seems to be kind of where they're going with Thunderbolts,
which I think is going to be fun.
I do appreciate that they've already established all of these characters. I mean, to some degree.
Except for Sentry or Bob, but I mean, we've already seen these characters in at least one film of sorts, right? So it's not like, oh, it's a new character, so now they have to worry about setting them up, giving us the backstory, growing why we should like them or hate them, and then going into the story. It's like, no, we already know their past,
right? But before we start talking about Thunderbolts, before we start talking about why these movies sucked or were great, Evan, Disney just barely re-released Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And
I saw it
were crazy
Thursday night,
enough to see it
Friday night, Saturday and Sunday.
Tell us about it.
And that might have just... I talked to you about this, and of course, right, Star Wars has a special place in my heart, but I grew up...
Very special place.
Very special place.
Hey, I get that, okay? The prequel trilogy for me I watched it a lot growing up. It was a big thing.
But I fell in love, and I watched that from my parents' living room TV, from my portable DVD player when I was going on family trips, from my first Xbox that I bought a Blu-ray and was able to put a disc in, kind of thing. And I fell in love with watching that movie from what felt like such a poor cinematic experience. What I mean by that is it wasn't in the theater. You weren't fully immersed.
Now, funny enough, my first movie I ever saw in theater was Star Wars Episode 3.
All right.
I was a 6-year-old little wombat, and I was running around doing whatever 6-year-olds do, but that was the first movie I ever saw in theaters.
I saw Star Wars: The Clone Wars movie as my first movie I ever seen.
Wasn't that released before Star Wars Episode 3?
No, it was after, because there was the Clone Wars that was by Cartoon Network. They were both by Cartoon Network. That came out, but it was a lot more of a 2D animation, and it came out between, I believe it was 2003 to 2000 and almost exactly 5. Because the last episode of that Clone Wars literally walked into the beginning of episode 3. But they decided to not go forward with that story any further and switched to more 3D animation. And that's when they introduced Ahsoka. And that was the first Star Wars movie that I saw in theaters. The point is being able to go and see Revenge of the Sith for what felt like the first time in theaters, because it technically was. It really had a special place in my heart. There were a few people that clapped on special places that I'm like, all right, you should just shut up.
I know, right?
It's a very sad movie.
It is. It's a very
tragedy. Sad movie. I mean, it's of course
the John
for people
Williams
who already know this.
Elevate that.
I know it's so, but that's what I'm saying. Hearing that in the theater.
Oh yeah,
that beautiful Anakin's betrayal by John Williams
it is
perfect. So for me, that I cried the first time because I was
First time or all 4 times?
3 out of the 4 times.
Wow. That's a new record. New record for
Surprised.
Evan.
But honestly, if you haven't already, just go. It's such a great way to relive such a great moment. And of course, we're keeping the theater industry
And the
alive,
thing is,
which I
too,
love.
people are going to see it actually in droves because I think it came in as the second highest grossing movie of the week.
Mm-hmm. I believe it said that it was on track to make 42 million.
Yeah, it was.
By the end
it's made a lot
I
of
think
money for
it's
being
right there
a
now.
20-year-old re-release of a movie
Well, but
that.
the CGI doesn't look 20 years old.
No, it doesn't look bad.
Which I'm also
it's
excited
definitely
for.
not
In
bad.
2 years, we get to do that exact same conversation for Transformers, and
I don't think they're going to release that in theaters.
Then we'll go
would
see
hope,
it for
but
20th anniversary sake. But the point is I had a really good time. It brought a lot of joy to my heart, and it's just given me that more of a light spirit to go into Thunderbolts coming soon, which I'm very excited for.
Well, you heard the man. If you love seeing movies in theaters, go watch Star Wars Episode 3 and let us know in the comments what you think about it. Now, that said, we've got a couple movies to talk about and digest today, and we're going to start off
Just a
with
few.
Ant-Man and the Wasp. So Ant-Man and the Wasp was released in 2018, right after Avengers Infinity War, directed by Peyton Reed, who also directed
It
the
was
first-
after Infinity War.
I think it was Peyton
Oh yeah,
Reed.
because this was happening right when
Right. So
the Avengers
in
was going
the
on.
context of the timeline, it's contemporary with Avengers Infinity
I
War.
forgot where this fell in the timeline. I just remember watching it.
Yeah, and
I was
then
like,
the
oh,
post-credits scene, it's like, oh, everybody gets snapped away.
Yeah.
And so Ant-Man and the Wasp, I'd only seen this movie once before I rewatched it this past weekend, and
I think I'm
it
right there
didn't
with
really, nothing really
Capture.
stood out to me.
Mhm.
Like,
We
I
talked
mean,
about that.
and that's in the same sense that it didn't really do that in the first time I watched it too. And so
Yeah.
overall, it just wasn't like,
It
nothing
was
crazy.
one of the few movies, unlike Captain Marvel, that
Oof.
was use. They put this movie out because it had to do, and it was of use to the next plot for Endgame.
Right.
But they did a decent job with it. Like, I mean, we'll of course get into all
I'm
of it
curious-
in a second, but you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like, they released Captain Marvel, and everybody's
Right.
like,
And that's the thing is like, that
"That
was,
sucked."
Marvel was at its height at this point. And so Ant-Man and the Wasp didn't make that much money. I think it probably was around like 700 million, if that. But then Captain Marvel released and hit $1 billion, which if that movie released now, there's not a chance it's getting that number.
No.
But this was
But
peak
people
Marvel.
felt, well, I was going to say, is people felt so much more obligated.
Yeah, because
go and
everything
see
was everything
It was
felt
connected.
interconnected, right?
And that's why I'm really excited for Thunderbolts, because we've seen these really subtle hints.
Right.
We know
It's
these
almost
characters.
like we're going back and re-experiencing watching the Avengers the first time because we've already experienced some of these characters, and
Mhm.
it'll be. They don't have to
excited.
do much backstory with that.
No,
With that said,
they
let's
don't.
talk about the good points of this movie. So, Evan, start us off. What are some reasons why people who haven't seen this or need to rewatch it? What are some reasons why people should watch it?
I would say Paul Rudd, right? He's not one of the funniest people out there, but he does a really good job at just being really whimsical, kind of subtle comedy, which I feel like has always kind of been that Marvel charm, right? We've always had, it's really been, Robert Downey Jr., who's had these snarky, sly comments, and you're just kind of like, you just laugh because, billionaire playboy thing. But Paul Rudd's character is really funny, and I really enjoyed that.
There's a big reason why these movies works because, I mean, you think about it, Ant-Man, like, are you serious?
Yeah, you kind of have to bring in this
Yeah, you have to bring
weird,
in a
kind of
comedic-
funny guy.
Yeah, in order to make it work.
Yeah.
So Paul Rudd was a very good casting choice for that
I
because he
agree.
makes it work. Something that I liked in this movie, which it didn't really go hard into, but I think it was leaning to that. And so, I mean, if you look at the first Ant-Man movie, right, it's a superhero movie, but it's also a heist movie in the sense that Captain America Winter Soldier is a superhero movie, but it's also a spy movie, right? It's a subgenre. But this
Ant-Man's
movie,
a lot more focused. The first one was a lot more focused around him being
really
the bank robber.
It's a
and
heist movie, right?
picking locks and
This one, you could tell with certain parts they were almost leaning towards a horror type of
they wanted to.
element, but they didn't go full send into that.
Yeah,
Which
they
I think
kind of wanted to with Ghost, trying to
Right.
make it seem like this horrendous murderer type person.
which I think
shit.
I'm not saying they should have gone that full direction, but it would have been interesting to see
Them try.
them try to go more into that to make
Yeah.
Ghost story be an actual like terrible story. So you could see they had little elements of that, and then obviously the third Ant-Man was just a garbage movie. There was no that was
hard.
It was the worst.
Yeah, that was
movie.
a really sad experience.
So that said, give me another reason why you liked this movie. Why this movie was good.
I thought it was kind of fun that we saw Lawrence Fishburne. I mean, we talked about it in the amateur. Like, I just enjoy him as an actor. I don't think that they let him kind of portray. Let me rephrase that. I don't think that his role was a role that he should have taken. I feel like he needs to have a little bit
something bigger.
He should have had a little bit more creative freedom of being able to be kind of a little bit more aggressive instead of this kind of just like teacher nerd guy. I don't know. I'm not going to say that he did a bad job because I think Lawrence Fishburne's good. He's not the best.
But he didn't. There just wasn't that much to work with.
I didn't see him and was like, yeah, Lawrence Fishburne, like he stands out. A great example is Hank Pym, that actor who plays him. He does a really good job. Like he portrays the role very well. I don't know, but I thought it was okay. I thought it was nice.
That's fair. You know what I really liked too was how they tied Ghost's backstory back into S.H.I.E.L.D. So in a sense, she's almost like a Bucky character where he was used as an assassin for Hydra. In the same sense, Ghost was Bucky for S.H.I.E.L.D.
It was a special agent.
I guess they were technically all the same organization anyway. But I would have liked to see them explore that more, and maybe even in a different movie where and maybe we'll get to see more of that in Thunderbolts because now that Ghost and Bucky are going to be in the same story. And Taskmaster as well. They're all essentially used for the same purpose where they're, used by some shadowy organization as assassins. And so now they're bringing all three of them together.
Yeah, I mean,
so
it was technically the same as Yelena. Red Guardian's probably the only one that's not. And then John Walker's story, of course, is out there, which I'm actually excited for. I remember watching the show. We talked about it, that you kind of feel the hatred towards him. Like you start to watch the show and you're like, this guy sucks. Like I hate this guy. So I'm kind of excited to see that script turn a little bit, hopefully in Thunderbolts. Anyway, but as far as Ant-Man,
I mean, and here's the thing about Ant-Man and the Wasp: is there's really not that much going on for. There's not that much to talk about.
I hate to say it. I thought it was one of those movies that I shrugged my shoulders and gave a weak thumbs up. It was like,
right. And you look at it, you look at the positives. There's not like anything that stands out like with other Marvel movies.
Crazy plot, enemy,
and.
Really anything.
I mean, you look at the bad points, right? You got the CGI, which in every Marvel movie now is just horrible. What are some other bad points for you that you would say this is a reason why this is not one of the best Marvel movies?
I think the plot went by really quick.
Yeah.
Like, it felt like it was too fast where they tried to give a little bit of time to show Ghost's backstory, the involvement with Lawrence Fishburne's professor, them eventually going in to, save mom. And everything just felt so just like, scene. And it just kept revolving very quickly that I feel like they didn't take a second to take away from that constant action to let these characters almost breathe and give us that reason why we should be enjoying them as actors.
Yeah. Another thing too that
I thought it was okay.
And I don't know whether it's because I have the bad taste of Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania in my mouth, which that could be it. But I do not like Michelle Pfeiffer and Michael Douglas together on screen. I hate it. I think they're terrible together on screen. And it may not even be this movie. It might be because the last Ant-Man movie I watched was Quantumania.
That one was really bad to see them on screen.
So
but we also didn't really get a lot of Michelle on it.
No, she's not in this one a lot. But yeah,
the plot's still about us finding her.
And I think it's Evangeline Lilly too. I don't like any of them, the three in this movie. I don't know why. It's just they just come off as
I don't know.
obnoxious.
I think that they were all given basically a role in the first Ant-Man, and then they were lucky enough to like be able to expand on it, that they're like, oh, we need to just keep using these actors and actresses, I guess. I don't know. I thought it was weird. And I was very happy with the casting of Cassie from Quantumania. I forget her name.
I don't remember.
She's really pretty. Anyway,
okay, chill yourself.
That was the only reason.
Chill yourself, son.
That
another thing that didn't work that well in this movie is, okay, here's the thing. Sonny Birch, right? he's played by give me the name. What's his name? He's in Walton Goggins. That's it. So Sonny Birch. He's played by Walton Goggins.
I was gonna say I was trying to think of what else he was from, but anyway.
Yeah.
Now my brain's not working.
I love Walton Goggins. I think he's a great actor, but in this movie, he didn't really. He
just
didn't
was
affect
there.
the plot at all.
Yeah, he was kind of just existed.
Yeah, and he added a little bit of opposition to the heroes, but he didn't ultimately cause them to have to make hard decisions, or didn't have to cause them to go through anything.
And we also didn't get a lot of screen time because it was just really him at the beginning and stuff.
Yeah, and then he shows up at the end trying to get off the building or whatever.
Yeah,
the little miniature building.
I really like. I mean, he did a really good job in like Fallout, which I enjoyed.
Wait, Fallout. Yeah,
yeah, the show.
I was thinking the good Fallout, but
no, the show.
I'll just relax. I'll just chill.
But yeah, so that was fun.
He's also he's in the third Maze Runner, which I really like. But that said, I don't think he was underused in this movie, and I think he could have done better with that. Another thing too that I will say is that for Ant-Man and the Wasp being as small of a story as it was, it actually did really well in, like we talked about earlier, making you feel like you had to watch it in order to be part of the endgame experience, because
you feel almost obligated to say, hey, I need to be paying attention to more of what the plot's doing. Captain Marvel's going to be in Endgame. Great, now I've got to go see this Marvel movie.
I know, right?
And it was kind of the same with this, where we were like, okay, this is going on during Infinity War.
So you have to watch it.
It's like, part what of the same correlation story. Does this have?
It's part of the connected universe. And ultimately, the post-credits scene does play a key point in Endgame.
Yeah.
Which is one thing that Marvel has definitely gotten away from, is actually having your post-credit scene mean something, because I don't remember the last Marvel post-credit scene that actually meant something. But this one did, right? It ended up playing a major plot point in Endgame, even if that plot point.
I'm just thinking of how good Captain America Brave New Worlds was.
Oh, you mean with the frog guy? What was his? I don't even remember his name now. But the frog guy being like, "Oh, there's more coming, buddy. There, you think you're the?" I don't even remember what it said.
Yeah, he literally was like, "There's more than you know," and he's like, "Well, who's coming? They are. Well, who's they? They are." And then that was it. And we're like,
"Thanks, Marvel. That was really helpful. We're
like, wow, did you come up with that 3 days before you had to produce the movie?"
That was really nice.
Yeah.
Anything else that you want to bring up about Ant-Man and the Wasp for anybody listening?
It's just. Nah.
I mean, I think it's a fun rewatch at times, but it's definitely not Marvel's best.
I didn't mind it compared to what else we're about to review, but
well, before we jump into that, let's give a brief let's give our brief ratings of them. Oh, wait. Not quite, but just before we do that, here's just a brief reminder of my scale where we're sitting at. Ant-Man the Wasp, Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania, I think is a terrible, terrible movie. I would recommend nobody ever watch that. That's a 1 star for me. For the Marvel version of our rating, at a 5 star, I have Thor: The Dark World, and at a 10 star, which I upped from my last time I rated this movie. I have Captain America: The Winter Soldier. That is my favorite Marvel movie. I think it's the best one.
Yeah.
Evan, quickly tell us about yours.
Eternals, which, as always, I think I'd rather bleed from my eyeballs than have to watch that again. And then Thor: The Dark World, which
it's just such a mediocre movie, right?
It's just so. And then, of course, the original Iron Man.
So, with that said, let's talk about what we gave it. Ultimately, I gave it a 6. I know I don't think it's bad. I don't think it's great. It is what it is.
Yeah, it's barely. Yeah. But like again, it's one of those movies that if it was on and I was just like there, I'd be like, watch it. It's kind of fun. But I'm not gonna just put it up unless if I need to.
Right.
Or something.
There's nothing. There's nothing in it that just stands out, and it's not like you did anything bad with it. It's just like it's there. That's all it is.
It served its purpose. Mm-hmm. It helped build a plot for the next movie. It made some money.
Now that said, I am excited to see Ghost in Thunderbolts because I think she was a bright spot of this movie. I do think
that Ghost is going to be very. I mean, in this movie, she's very overpowered because we're talking about technically superpowers in an extent. I mean, if we're looking at the Thunderbolts lineup, Winter Soldier is probably going to be the only one that would kill everybody.
One more thing that I thought was terrible for this movie is I do not understand so at the very end, right, when Michelle Pfeiffer shows up and she's talking there she sees Ghost there, right, and she just like touches her face or whatever, and she's like all of a sudden healed, and it's like no explanation, no reason. We just assume that she had some kind of magical power that she could heal ghosts, and so now she doesn't do her weird phasing thing. Yeah. But I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they do with her.
Yeah. I do like all the new outfits that we've seen for everybody
in Thunderbolts. Yeah. No, I agree. Well, anyway, with that, let's move on to the movie that I think was probably going to be best preparing us for Thunderbolts, because there are 3 characters we know of that are going to be in this movie. That is Black Widow. I'm going to
crash out.
So Black Widow was released. Okay, let's start with that. Black Widow was released. Was it 21 or 22?
It's 21, I think.
So July of 21. So right after COVID, right? So theaters are still starting to open up. That was his first mistake, is releasing it at that point.
Yeah.
Second mistake was releasing it after you literally killed Black Widow in Avengers Endgame. Spoiler alert for those who haven't seen Avengers Endgame. She died.
Say at this point, if you haven't seen one of the biggest movies,
you can't.
You're an idiot.
Why are you even listening to this podcast for?
Stupid. But yeah, we literally saw this character die, and then they're like, actually, we're bringing her back for a pre-story that has nothing to do with this, but don't worry, you know that she's already dead, so it doesn't matter.
Right, so that's the biggest problem, is that this movie is a prequel to a saga that already finished. So we have no reason to really care. We know what's going to happen to her, and it's not in the sense of like a traditional prequel, because we're 9 movies in or whatever that Black Widow's been in, like 7 movies in, and then you decide to do her prequel or origin story.
Iron Man 2, which was
2010. Yeah, it was 2010.
2010.
So she was in Iron Man 2, The Avengers. She was in Captain America, Winter Soldier, Avengers 2, Civil War, Endgame, and Infinity War. So that's 7 movies that you have Black Widow in. Then you decide to do her solo movie after she's already died.
Basically 8 years, 9 years.
Yeah, so it's 9
playing
years.
The same character,
exactly.
And then they're like, hey, let's give some backstory to
So that's the biggest problem with this movie, and that's the reason why this movie flopped at the box office so bad. Because had this movie been released, say it took the spot of Ant-Man and the Wasp, I think this movie would have made $1 billion, because it would have been part of that interconnected story. Because this movie takes place right after, or even not even after Infinity War, but if you had released it after Civil War, I think that it would have been close to $1 billion, if not $1 billion, in the sense that the same reason why Captain Marvel made $1 billion.
Yeah, I think that overall this was such a poor time for them to make the movie.
It was.
Realistically, this movie would have been great in the time of like, hey, Iron Man, right after the first Avengers comes out, because we don't really have the backstory. Like if they produced this, people probably would have been a little bit more interested and inclined to go see it.
Here, I think the story itself isn't bad in the sense of setting it right between Civil War and Infinity War when she's on the run. But when you release it after Endgame, 2 years after Endgame at that,
yeah,
why does anybody care? Why is anybody going to go see it? And I think that's the reason why it flopped too, is because nobody wanted to see it.
Maybe they like had some dumb contract and they're like, yeah, we actually have you for one more movie. And she's like, why? They're like, because. And then it was like, bah.
I don't get it.
Anyway.
But that said, Black Widow follows the story of, as you might guess, Black Widow. Right after Civil War, when she's technically a fugitive from everybody in the world. And so it follows her story of reconnecting with her childhood family, the people she grew up with who are also Russian spies. And they together have to collectively take down the Red Room, which is still chipping out Black Widows and making all these assassins. And so that's where the story starts. It starts technically after Civil War, but in real life, it happened in 2021, and we didn't care at that point.
Yeah, it was such a poor.
But before we start diving into the flaws of this movie, let's talk about good points. Every movie has some, except for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
Thank you.
So, give me something good about this movie.
I like David Harbour.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I like David Harbour, and I think he's going to be really fun in Thunderbolts.
He's one of the reasons why I'm really excited for Thunderbolts, is because he brings a lot of energy to this role, and he brings a lot. It looks like he brings
this hunk, like literally a hunk. He's just tall, beefy, strong, and just and like it's just going to be fun. So I thought that he was a really great addition to this, and we got introduced to him and his character, the Red Guardian, which was basically the Russian Captain America, and he has to walk around like, oh, I once beat him in Russia over vodka. Like, it's just fun. So I'd say that was the pro. I didn't mind Florence Pugh getting introduced as Yelena. I'm not the biggest fan.
I'm not the
it.
biggest fan of Florence Pugh, but I think she did really well in this role.
I agree.
And
I think that she's been in so many better roles.
I think she completely stole the show from Scarlett Johansson, because when you watch it, you're way more entertained. At least I was way more entertained by Florence Pugh than I was by Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah.
Just because she was more fun. She felt more relatable. She felt more like a Marvel character. But
this definitely felt like it was Scarlett Johansson being like, okay, I'll do one more movie.
Yeah.
But then everybody else was like, I'm excited to be here. And she's like, get me out.
She didn't seem like she was having as much fun with this movie as David Harbour or Florence Pugh.
100%.
And so that's actually another reason why I'm excited for Thunderbolts, is because I think the two biggest standouts of this movie are those two, and they're the ones who are going to be in Thunderbolts playing, I would think, a major role in it.
It sounds to me that they're all going to kind of be major in their own way to an extent, but honestly, those are my only pros. I have nothing.
Wow. So I will say, when I rewatched this, it actually was not nearly as bad as I remember it to be, because this was one of the first movies I saw after COVID in theaters, and I was just excited to be back in the theaters.
Marvel movies or just movies in general?
No, just movies in general. This is one of
Really?
the first, yeah. It wasn't the first, it was one of the first.
I was going to say, I think that the first major movie that I went back and saw in theaters was Tenet, that's a sad story.
But anyways, it wasn't quite as bad as I remember it being. So with that said, it actually ultimately ends up getting a higher rating than I would have given it had I not rewatched it. Because, so a few things, I think that they do, the first 3/4 of the movie I think is pretty good. I think the storyline is good.
I'll give you some of that. I mean, I don't think it's
fantastic. I don't think it's great, but I think it's not bad, and it's not like it's
semi-entertaining.
It doesn't
like,
do
whatever.
If you look back at other Marvel movies, it doesn't do anything necessarily worse.
Basically everything leading up to them getting to the Red Room.
Yeah, I think it's not bad. I think the practical action that they do have is pretty good. There's still a lot of CGI that's in there, and it's not very good. But we'll talk about that when we get to the third act of the movie.
Yeah.
But I think it was entertaining, and it kept my interest. And
okay.
I don't like if I look at it compared to Ant-Man and the Wasp, it's like I don't see the difference between the two, in that they're both entertaining, at least until the last act of this movie, when I think it really went downhill. So that said, I'm just trying to refresh myself if there are any other good points in this. I do think that this movie actually, it had a very good balance of humor and seriousness to it.
Yeah.
And in the sense that a lot of Marvel movies do, but it wasn't bad. Now, one thing I will say about this movie, if you go and you watch it, you can tell that the creators of this movie, I mean, granted it's Marvel Universe, but they were very much trying to do a Captain America Winter Soldier type of thing.
Everybody's been trying to duplicate.
Because, I mean, you look at just specific examples in the plot, right? The plot has this person who's been lost for a long time. Everybody thought was dead. Turns out she's actually a mind-controlled assassin that they end up having to free and tell her to go live her own life in the end. Right, so there's point number one. Number two, the third act of the movie was very much trying to be Captain America the Winter Soldier, in the sense they have to take down these flying massive ships that are hovering and
basically ready to kill
thousands, and they're operated by an undercover secret organization, right? So in where Captain America Winter Soldier was the helicarriers, here it's the Red Room. And then third thing that's just obviously the big major one is that the villain works for a shadowy organization that has mind-controlled assassins. So you could tell that it was very much trying to be Captain America the Winter Soldier, but in its own Black Widow type of way. It did not work out as well as you would.
I think it's sad that there's been a lot of Marvel movies that are like, that was really good, let me do that, instead of like, hey, let's do the original. And I mean, that's something that we've been arguing and talking about forever, that people just don't want to have original thoughts anymore.
Right. And it's the same thing too with Captain America Brave New World. I mean, that movie was also trying to catch that lightning that Captain America Winter Soldier was.
Awful.
But Brave New World was horrible. I mean, it was worse than Black Widow. I think it was a lot worse than Black Widow. I'd rewatch Black Widow before I would Brave New World.
I agree with that, because then at least I get to watch David Harbour.
I think there's a lot more pluses to this movie than there was to Brave New World.
They did a better job at setting this up than they did with Brave New World, which is sad to say.
But I mean, I don't know. But
Depressing.
I know you've been waiting for it for
The
20
CGI,
minutes.
please.
Just give me your cons. Why should people not see this movie if they're looking for a Marvel movie to watch?
The iconic CGI of Yelena getting blasted off the roof.
All you have to do is like Google, look up on YouTube, just Black Widow bad CGI. You will get that scene, I promise. Just go do it. Right after you're done listening to this, I want you to go look up Black Widow bad CGI, and it's going to pop up. There's going to be this scene where Yelena is standing on something. She has like this weird staff or something. She just stabs it in. And then this horrible shot, probably the worst shot I've ever seen in a movie. Oh my gosh. I don't know how that made it to the final cut of the movie, but somehow it did.
Somehow they let that. That's what's crazy to me, right? Like somebody saw that, was like, yeah.
We need to have a tournament of bad shots from Marvel movies, because I think it'd be fun.
I thought you just meant in general, because I saw this
or
one movie.
Bad shots from okay, let's do this. Bad shots from
Velocipaster.
No, it has to be movies that have the budget. So bad shots from movies that have big Hollywood budgets. So you think about that shot, you think about the shot in Brave New World where Sam Wilson's toward the end, just standing on this green screen, and the color grading is horrible. He's just
it's bad.
It's funny. And then there's a couple shots I think in Thor: Love and Thunder that were along the same lines.
Yeah.
There's Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness when he grows that third eye. That's like so bad. It's like someone just got some stock photo eye and just put it on Doctor Strange's head. So anyway, the CGI in this movie does get very bad towards the third act of the movie.
Yeah, because then they started to rely on it.
Yeah, because I mean, you can't exactly build a giant floating city.
If it was Christopher Nolan, he would.
And that's what Christopher Nolan doesn't direct Black Widow.
That's why he doesn't do super.
Is that your only con, though?
I thought that it was really poor that they didn't establish Taskmaster at all. The movie shouldn't have been made in general. There was absolutely no point for this movie to have been made, because they missed their opportunity to even make it.
I agree with that completely.
Reliable.
I agree with that completely. That said, I would watch this every day of the week, Sundays included, before I ever laid my eyes on Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I will never watch that movie again as long as I'm alive, unless someone paid me to do it a lot of money.
Interesting. I mean, I hate that movie, but I don't hate it as much as you, because I can at least give it, hey, we got Kang, and I like Jonathan Majors.
Yeah, but you got David Harbour in this movie. David Harbour is good. He's entertaining.
But Jonathan Majors was supposed to...
Supposed to, but not rip. The intro to Taskmaster I actually really liked when... And again, is another thing that you could see that they were trying to mimic with Captain America: The Winter Soldier, right? You have Nick Fury who's driving around, then all of a sudden Bucky or the Winter Soldier attacks him. It's the very identical type of scene here. But I do like Taskmaster's introduction. I thought it was good, and it did a good job of trying to start doing something with her, but then ultimately, I think she fell off the grid for the middle part of the movie.
Yeah, I think it's also hard. A character like Taskmaster, they don't give the opportunity for the actress or actor to act. Actually, they're just there playing a role. They don't get to. I mean, in this case, how many times did Taskmaster speak? Even.
Yeah, I agree with that, because
that's one thing that I have with a role like this is these people get glorified for such they did such a great job. They ran, they jumped, they stood around.
Most of it was probably a stunt person.
Which at that point,
I do agree in that sense that she did not work well, because if you look at Ghost and Bucky, who are very similar characters in the same type of story, both of them were still able to be characters, even though they were the mind-controlled assassin. I guess Ghost wasn't technically mind-controlled. But
I know what you're saying.
But
they were still
able to be characters, have personality.
Be a human almost.
And I guess Bucky probably benefited from the fact that we already saw him in the first Avengers, so we had a little bit of development there.
Yeah.
But that can't be the same thing with Ghost, because Ghost we did feel some connection to her, even though she was the same type of deal as here.
Yeah.
That said, anything else that you disliked or liked about it?
I think more importantly, and the reason why it did get a really bad score, is just the timing. I mean, you agree this movie should not have been made.
I agree. 100%.
It was a waste of everybody's tax dollars and everybody's time and everybody's money.
I do agree that it didn't have a purpose.
I think that it could have had a purpose if it was on a better schedule, where they were like, hey, let's come up Because I know that they
think
had this
I'd
idea
actually be
brewing.
less critical of it if it had been released.
100%. If it
after
was
Civil War.
released or before even, if it was anytime before Infinity War, anytime, I don't care when, anytime before Infinity War, I would have been
You could have even released it after Infinity War because Black Widow's still alive. And
then we would have been like, oh, this is cool.
And
we
then
get a little bit of backstory. And then we're like,
we
oh, and now
understand
she's
that-
dead?
We understand this before Civil War and Infinity War, but at
Yeah.
least we haven't got to Endgame where we've seen the end of her character. Right?
I get that.
So
That's
with all that
honestly
said,
the ultimate reason why this movie got such a low score. Like, I didn't think it was really that bad of a movie, but because of how poorly they planned it and literally it was just a waste of money and
Yeah.
they knew that, I'm giving it a low score because Marvel purposefully knew that this movie wasn't going to do well, but they were like, let's just throw it out there anyway, which is just another reason why Phase 5 has been absolutely
oh
shit,
yeah, 100% agree.
except for soon.
We'll see with Thunderbolts. But the plus side of this movie is we did get characters that I think are likable, and I'm excited to see
Red
them.
Guardian, Yelena,
And
and Taskmaster,
Thunderbolts.
I think are going to be fun.
Here's my bold prediction. Taskmaster is going to
Dies.
die. She's going to
100%.
die in
In case
Thunderbolts.
of people haven't already seen, but she's only in like
And I
3 or
don't-
4 seconds of the trailer.
Yeah, I don't know that. This is a spoiler alert that's not actually a real spoiler alert because I don't know that for a fact, but I'm just going
I'm
to say
taking a
spoiler
100%
alert.
of it goes
100% Taskmaster dies. She isn't featured a lot in the trailers,
Well,
and
there's the main scenes of them fighting Sentry at the very end, and she's not even there. That's the biggest thing.
she I don't remember her name. She's the same girl in Oblivion. She's in
Whatever the actress's
she's
name
in
is.
Quantum of Solace, but
Yeah.
she wasn't even listed as a cast member for Avengers
Doomsday.
Doomsday, so I don't think she makes it. But we'll see.
As of
in-
the time of filming, Doomsday has officially started.
that's true.
I saw the cool post by Marvel and Robert Downey Jr. that just said Victor Von Doom. It was just a chair.
If it turns out we're wrong and Taskmaster lives and she is in Avengers Doomsday, then everybody can comment and let us know that we're lying.
Idiots.
We're stupid. So let's talk about ratings. What would you give your rating?
Something horrible. I hated this movie, dude.
Well, I gave this movie a 5. I was juggling between a 5 and a 5.5 because I don't think it's horrible,
4.
but I do think that the last act of the movie drags it down considerably.
I give it a 4. Just because man,
Evan's sad. He's
just
a
like
sad
why?
dog.
I mean, we've been so disappointed with Phase 5 for so long. The only things that have come out of Phase 5 that were good or even semi-decent, Spider-Man, No Way Home. Beautiful movie. Love it.
Spider-Man No Way Home was good.
Love that movie. That was such a great experience. The only other thing that I didn't mind that I would probably give a 5 would be Multiverse of Madness. I thought it was okay.
I didn't like Multiverse of Madness.
Well, would you rate it better than this?
Honestly, I think I'd rather watch Black Widow than Multiverse of Madness.
You're a fucking okay.
Here's
That's crazy. That's
here's the
crazy
thing.
that you'd rather watch that than this.
Here's the thing. I went to Multiverse of Madness with high expectations to see a lot of cameos that
We all
they were
thought about it because it was
that they were-
Sam Raimi
that people were hyping up.
because of he was going to go through the
Right.
multiverse.
That was the first multiverse movie because that was before Spider-Man No Way Home, right? And so
That was the same year because that was 2021.
yeah,
What a great.
but
yeah,
that
and then they
was
cooked with Spider-Man.
so that was the first multiverse movie we were getting. So what were you expecting to see? A bunch of cameos from multiverse versions of people, and the cameos we got were horrible. Nobody wanted them; they were terrible. The one I think that people actually liked was John Krasinski as
Reed Richards.
Reed Richards.
Yeah, I did like how we got whatever his name is that played Alexander or Xavier, Charles Xavier.
Mhm.
Wow,
Patrick Stewart,
thank you,
bro. If Marvel's
they're
out there
confirmed
listening,
for Doomsday,
I know, but
which
if
is
Marvel's
so
out there
weird.
listening, stop casting Patrick Stewart. He's like 170 years old.
He
Just
can't
bring
act
back
anymore.
James McAvoy, please. Please
Dude,
bring back James
X-Men
McAvoy.
First Class is slept on.
It is. I
It's a
think,
great film.
especially
Oh.
James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender
Did great
as
together.
Magneto and Xavier are so good.
They
And
had
I don't
great
know,
chemistry on screen. We're getting so off.
I don't know
But
why they don't just bring them back because they were so much better than. I know that's unpopular opinion. Okay, I get it.
but
They
still,
were so much better than Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen in those roles.
I 100% agree.
So I'm just throwing that out there. Just throwing that like a noodle on a wall. Never heard that?
Like a piece of cheese on a baby's forehead.
Or that. But next week, be sure to tune in because next week we have Thunderbolts. So we got our tickets already. We're ready to go
We're
see
very
it.
excited.
And I am really excited. I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be
really
movie.
refreshing. We've got some really great actors and actresses. They all kind of have their weird quirks to it. It sounds like we're going to get a lot more kind of insight into what's been going on in the universe, because Captain America did not do any of that, which I think was another big flaw, where they didn't really like talk about post-blip stuff, which it sounds like this is going to be, where they're facing facts. Avengers aren't here, dude. Like, what's going to happen when we have another threat?
All I got to say is,
I don't
if
know.
I was in the Marvel Universe, I would not live in New York City. That's a hard pass for me.
Well, because Daredevil,
Bro,
the whole Daredevil show's going
bad,
around the
everything
same time
bad
too.
happens in New York City.
At least you got Spider-Man in Queens.
Yeah, but how many times have they've attacked New York City? They attacked New York City, and
Whatever. All right,
The point
it's
is-
depressing.
the point is, be sure to tune in next time. And let us know in the comments what you thought of Black Widow and Ant-Man and the Wasp. Whether
Horrible
you thought
movies.
they were great, horrible, whether you'd watch them again. And be sure to tune in next week when we talk about Thunderbolts, and we will be sure to give you all of the spoilers as always. With that, we'll see you next time on Spoiler Alert.